I think that's a great question. From the investor's perspective, one of our key challenges is always really trying to decipher what are the real risks. And, there's two ways of approaching it. One is being very transparent early on in the process and laying it out. These are the opportunities. These are the challenges as well. Otherwise, I can guarantee you, and let's say you don't say what the challenges are right up front, I can guarantee you it'll come out during the diligence. And, that it certainly puts more pressure on the relationship, because if all of a sudden, I go into it and let's say I give you a term sheet, I'd like to invest under these terms, it's because I've assessed the risks in such a way. And then if all of a sudden I find out, hey, but what happened here, and it could be a deal breaker, it creates even more risk because you doubt the entrepreneur's character. And that is a deal breaker. One of the key things I like to do pretty early on in the diligence as well is I like to ask, show me, let's say right now I'd say, show me your budget 18 months ago for what your 2010 P&L was going to be like. And then I like to compare that to your actual results. And, never is it going to be on point. I mean, it's either 50% better or 50% worse. But there's always a story to it. And in that context, I always like to ask the questions. These were the key 5 assumptions. Where were you right? Where were you wrong? Where's your upside? Where's the downside? And I'm not going to penalize you because you got it wrong. I want to understand your thought process for how you assessed that information. And that's kind of where you start understanding how sharp that entrepreneur is. Their vision, how they respond to different outcomes as well. And I think, instead of looking at it as a negative, it's a way of saying we're being proactive. These are the challenges, and being transparent. What do you suggest? What have you seen in other companies you've invested in? How can we mitigate this? I think, being very genuine and honest is probably the better way to go.
Yeah, it's a great question, but normally I like to say it depends on the audience and what the structure of the meeting is going to be about and all that. But normally you'll have about 6 to 8 meetings before a term sheet gets finalized anyways, and in that process everything's going to come out. So no matter what skeletons you have, it's going to come out eventually anyways. I like to say the point of the first meeting is to make sure you get a second meeting if it's one-on-one. And normally in that first meeting, as an investor, I'll always ask them, what are your challenges you see and what keeps you up at night? And so it will come out, but I'm not going to grill you on that first meeting anyways. I just want to see what the space is about. If it's exciting, I have 30 minutes to spend with you. You tell me why you like it. That's great. I'll shoot some holes in it a little bit, so you'll give me some feedback. And then the next meeting, we'll really sit down a lot more and go through it and keep going more and more as we go on down that road.
Yeah, adding to that, do I need to stand? I guess I'm all right. Going back to my earlier point around if people are bought into your vision and they're bought into who you are as an entrepreneur, and particularly in the context of social investment, they'll walk off a cliff for you. That they're really, that partnership piece is there and people understand that this is not easy to do. And I think, one of the good pieces of the culture of Silicon Valley is the attitude towards risk. And a lot of investors who say, I won't invest in someone who hasn't failed before, just knowing how much that teaches you. And I think that's very different than what we're often taught, and particularly depending on our backgrounds, right? I, as a young woman, often feel like I'm not allowed to fail the way that other people might be, and that I went through that a lot with the first organization that I ran as a 22-year-old entrepreneur, and did a lot of holding things inside because I didn't want to tell anyone that I had screwed up, right? And as soon as I was able to really leave that personally and feel comfortable, I found that it actually brought me so much closer to people, and that they want to help you and they understand that it's all part of a learning process. And I actually think that it's one of the strongest ways you can strengthen a relationship is to be really honest with people. And like Sony was just mentioning, that if you can give a really careful, thoughtful analysis of this is this challenge, this is how I'm systematically looking at addressing it, that's very impressive. And I would definitely, doesn't have to be in your 10-minute pitch, right? I think it's after you've had that first beer, and started to form that relationship, and then you're at the point you're able to say, we're really excited about this, can you help me brainstorm this challenge? And then the final piece, I'll mention on that, one approach that's been really successful is before you're asking for money. We've had entrepreneurs that come through and say, we don't know quite how to structure our financials yet. We're just, we're a little beginner at this, we're a little confused. Can you do a meeting with us and help us figure out how to get our business plan together? If we sit down and do that, and we've done it on a couple occasions, when that entrepreneur comes back in 4 months and said, okay, got my plan together, did exactly what you said, it's pretty hard for the investor to say no, right at that point. So I think there's a piece of using some of that vulnerability. It's a great time to connect with people. When people write me and ask for advice, I'm much more likely to respond than if someone's just writing asking for money. So like, oh God, they're just gonna pitch me. So.
I think Morgan just mentioned a very good point, which is the financials. And, you guys are a small company right now and in many ways and don't have the resources to have a good CFO in place or good, the top-notch accounting practices. And I tend to look at companies that are much further along in the growth cycle, companies at least $5 million in sales, 10 million, whatever it is. But the one thing that, at least for our group, is a complete deal breaker is if they don't have good numbers. If you start asking questions and the people don't know how to respond, or you doubt the quality of that information, that's a huge deal breaker, because the problem there is, how could you run a business if you don't know what's going on? And I love companies that are obsessed with data, cutting things up from every angle. What is the cost of electricity per box? What is the cost of gas? What is the cost of labor? What is the overtime? So, the more detail you have and the more, data obsessed you become, it becomes very easy for the investor. And I think it's certainly a quality I've seen in a lot of the successful investments we made. They all have that common trait. So it's also, I think it's a piece of advice there.
Okay, well, actually, this is not a question for the panel as much as a general comment, as I'm sure everybody's going to be leaving soon, or some of you are going to be leaving. And at the risk of being corny, I really want to say thank you. In the case of Agora, and specifically thank you to Ricardo, to Ben, and to the team. Sorry. I want to say a legitimate thank you, because you're going to have 50 meetings next week, and we all go to meetings, and sometimes it becomes a blur. And every so often you have meetings where you actually get something out of it that's useful. And for me, it's very, very helpful. So thank you, and thank you.
No, thank you. Okay. Now you guys will indulge me one last time, and we're going to take a group picture with a beautiful sunset. So a big round of applause for everybody. Thank you very, very much.